Hi, this is John from John's Record Collection. I'm at box number 11, Food to Uri Geller.
But that's my dog Smokey. She's a very good girl. And so I always like to show the first record alphabetically in the box. So this is Forever is a Dream by the band Food. They were a psychedelic band on the Capitol label. So the Capitol label, which made tons of money by signing the Beatles, also had a lot of money to experiment with different psychedelic bands, including bands like Food, which didn't necessarily sell a lot of records back in the day, but it's a good, soft psych record. And what else do we have? Oh, The Fool. I just love this cover, The Fool. I've had a couple copies of this, but I found one copy at a flea market in Oakland, California. So The Fool, actually, they didn't originally start out as musicians. They were actually a collective of artists, and the record is actually pretty good. It reminds me a little bit of the Incredible String Band, but The Fool were mainly known as psychedelic mural artists, and they designed the psychedelic mural that was on the side of the building which housed the Beatles' Apple Records. And so they may be more known for that than for their music, but I actually think their music's a little underrated. For mature adults only, and so this is a record. This is a sex education record with some interesting spoken word bits from the late 60s. And the music side of Ford and Angel. Ford and Angel, pretty good lounge record. I think some of their other records have some beats or some drum breaks on them that people are looking for. So definitely something to check out. And Louise Forestier, she was a Quebecois singer. This is one of her more psychedelic records. And I think she shows her nipples somewhere to the top of the cover. And Fort Mudge, see, it's very dry in my house because we are in freezing cold winter in Minnesota. So I'm occasionally tripping over my tongue. But this is the Fort Mudge Memorial Dump. And it's a psychedelic band out of Boston. Unfortunately, a lot of the psychedelic bands out of Boston didn't sell many records because basically the record companies botched it. They made it sound like that Boston was going to be the new San Francisco, and they tried to create a local music scene, but without there being a real organic music scene. So a lot of the psychedelic bands from Boston got hurt by that, and Fort Mudge Memorial Dump was kind of one of those bands. And here are some really crazy spoken word records. They are radio plays. They're radio plays associated with a guy named Judson Fountain. These are very rare, but I was very lucky to find them on eBay many years ago because somebody had found them from a library sale in New York City, and they were selling them on eBay without any pictures. So I bought them sight unseen, but these are actually quite rare radio plays, and very weird ones at that. And this is mainly interesting because it has like a fluorescent orange cover. Let's see, oh yeah, they have a cover version of the Beatles Yesterday, so that's probably another reason why I got it. But they have some other good cover versions on it. And Four Notes in Search of a Tune. This is a very interesting, library music or royalty-free music that was used for TV shows and movies was a very big tradition in the UK and in continental Europe, but it was not so much a tradition in the United States. But this is one of the more interesting and in-demand library records music. Four Notes in Search of a Tune. And this one. The Four Seasons, Seasons Greetings. It's I found this at a garage sale many years ago. It is a Christmas record by the Four Seasons. So it has those high-pitch, doo-wop falsetto voices, but they're singing Christmas songs. So their rendition of Santa Claus is Coming to Town is a hoot because Frankie Valli is like singing ridiculously high notes in that version. And I find it interesting and funny, and I like a little out of the ordinary Christmas music to liven up my Christmas music selection. So I'm glad I have this. And this is A Hard Day's Night. So the name of this group is called the Four Squirrels. They forgot to put the name of the group actually on the cover of the record. It was put out by Wincoat, which is a very cheapo budget label, which is kind of why they did things like forgetting to put the name of the band on the cover. So it's the Four Squirrels, and it's basically a record like Alvin and the Chipmunks with speeded up voices, but with Chipmunk-style cover versions of the Beatles, but they're supposed to be squirrels. But it's basically the same technique where they basically take regular person's voices and speed them up to make them sound really high. And, the commune Nazis exposed the Fourth Reich. So yeah, this is a killer spoken word record. One reason it is killer is that it doesn't just have spoken word portions from some guy talking, but it has some field recordings from some really radical demonstrations in the 60s. And then it has this guy, really anti-communist guy, trying to talk doom and gloom all over it. So it's a really interesting period piece of a spoken word record, and I like it. And Kim Fowley, Good Clean Fun. This guy, he was not such a good person. He probably sexually assaulted a bunch of people, but he did some really interesting. Kim Fowley was an amazing record producer, and he produced all sorts of kinds of singles, but he also did a couple of crazy spoken word psychedelic albums in the 1960s. Good Clean Fun is one of these albums. Let's see if I should have another one. Yes, Love is Alive and Well, Kim Fowley, so I have this one. I have a third Kim Fowley record. Kim Fowley, Outrageous. So his 1960s era records are very crazy. They're very insane and crazy in usually the best possible way, but he was kind of a dick. Charlie Fox and the Ring of Sound. I think this is a lounge record out of Canada. It has some interesting electronic effects like ring modulator on it, and it has it's a now sound, what they call a now sound record, where it's like easy listening covers of top 40 music from the mid to late 60s. And we have here Fragile. This is it's a lounge band from Nebraska. I have it because it has a cover version of Let It Be. And Francisco, Cosmic theme experience. So this is kind of part of, so these kind of records were more common when I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. It is kind of, part of an era when people were moving away from psychedelic music into new age music. So there's a lot of commonalities and continuities between psychedelic and new age music. And I think there's some hipsters who are starting to rediscover some of the 1970s and 1980s new age music and discover that some of it has musical merits in its own right. So this is kind of psych adjacent new age music. And actually, let me show you the back cover because it's kind of cool. I don't know if you can see it from this distance, but he has a lot of percussion instruments, like a setup with some gongs and some stuff. So very interesting. I used to find copies at garage sales all the time in Berkeley, or I'd find really cheap copies at Amoeba. So it was something I found all the time, but I think it's even collectible. Frankenstein and his ghouls. So this is associated with the monster craze of the early 1960s, when it was very popular to be into Frankenstein and Dracula and the old Universal monster movies. So this is kind of a surf rock mercy beat version that is trying to, it's surf rock mercy beat that is trying to cash in on the monster craze. And to make it a monster record, there's all these spooky sound effects and rattling chains and creaking doors all over the record. But I think there might even be some instrumentals that are basically stolen from Beatles songs on here, so that might be another reason I got them. But even if it didn't have Beatles covers on it, I would still get it. So Frankenstein and the Ghouls, it's a very interesting record. If you can find a copy that's clean. There are copies out there, but often they're scratched up. But if you can find a clean copy, that's hard to find. So here's Roosevelt Franklin. Roosevelt Franklin, if you're a Gen Xer, you might recognize Roosevelt Franklin from Sesame Street. So Roosevelt Franklin was a character. They never really said what his race was, but he was coded as black. And he went to an inner city school, and he was a really smart kid. And he taught kids the joy of learning, and he knew his ABCs, but he was also funky as hell. And he was voiced by Matt Robinson, so he was voiced by a black man. Matt Robinson was the original Gordon on Sesame Street, and he's the father of Holly Robinson Peete, the actress, who's married to the basketball player Rodney Peete. And Roosevelt Franklin, he's a funky dude, so this is some of the funkiest stuff that Sesame Street ever did, if you can imagine Sesame Street be funky. And Roosevelt Franklin, he is a cool dude, so I love to get Roosevelt Franklin records, and this is why I have it. So I very fondly remember those Roosevelt Franklin segments on Sesame Street. But if you didn't grow up with that, certainly I encourage you to look up Roosevelt Franklin Sesame Street on YouTube. And this is a very nice psychedelic cover, kind of a yellow and pink lemonade negative cover. It's frantic. I believe they were from the Pacific Northwest. And let's see. This is a very, very nice record. The Freak Scene, the Psychedelic Soul. It is an amazing psychsploitation record. It has great sitar sound on it. It even has some mildly political stuff like draft beer, not students on it. It's a trip. Freak Out, the great new guitar sounds. This is a budget label record. I don't know if it's that psychedelic, but if you like the guitar sound, the 1960s guitar sound, it's good. Freak Out USA. Now this is a nice. So it's a psychedelic compilation of a bunch of different bands with a lot of psych garagey content. I don't even know if these bands were real bands. They might have been just a bunch of studio-only groups that they kind of threw together and put into a compilation. It may also have been a bunch of bands that had like maybe one good song, but you didn't want to sign them to a total record deal, and so you just put them on a compilation. I'm not exactly sure what the story is behind it. The Free Band, another obscure psychedelic band from Vanguard Records. So, obscure psychedelic bands from Vanguard Records are worth checking out. And, of course, I'm getting into a really great section. The Free Design on Project 3 Records, Heaven, Earth. So, the Free Design, if you haven't heard of them, you need to go check them out. They are pure sunshine pop. It was mostly a group of brothers and sisters. It was a guy named Chris Dedrick, who was like the big brother of the group, and he was a very, very excellent musical arranger. So he arranges these amazing harmonies with great orchestration, and it is incredible sunshine soft pop psych. And they had many great albums. They were kind of an influence on the Carpenters, but much better than the Carpenters, in my humble opinion. The Free Design. And here's another one. This is probably their most well-known album, Kites Are Fun. Kites Are Fun. It's an amazing song by them. In fact, I like to try to track down cover versions of Kites Are Fun, but this is one of their best records. But like so many of their, like pretty much all their records on Project 3 are amazing and good. This one is One by One on Project 3. It's a much more somber record cover, but they're still great with the sunshine pop, but they kind of have, they have jazz chops, so they have jazz vocal chops, so if they need to do something minor key or moody, they can do that too. This is kind of their children's record. Free Design, Sing for Very Important People, and this one has the theme song to Sesame Street on it, and a lot of children's-oriented songs. It is great, and like pretty much I'm like a huge Free Design fan, or a Free Design stan, as the kids say. Free Design, this is, like Startime Bubbles Love. I forget even what the full title is. It's like Startime Bubbles Love is the title. It has this amazing, like, Jackson Pollock style front cover. It is like jazzy pop psych. It is unbelievable. It's just like pure sugar in your veins. Just so sweet. And Bubbles is one of my favorite songs by them. And here, this is the rarest Free Design item I have in my collection. So this is a private press that Free Design did after, I guess, Project 3 was no longer a thing as a label, or if they got dropped by Project 3. So There Is a Song, the Free Design on Ambro Type Records. It was a rare record. Now, where were we? So let's see what we got here. I have another Free Design record. You Could Be Born Again by the Free Design. This is another one of those Project 3 records that we did. I pretty much love everything that the Free Design put out. They were an amazing vocal group, adjacent with psychedelic and sunshine pop. The Free Dig Big Band. This is a German group that did Beatles covers, so it's a tribute to the Beatles, and I think it's mostly German. And here's one. It's a Belgian psychedelic pop electronic record. The Free Pop Electronic Concept. So it was only published in Europe. And the Free Spirits. This is a jazz rock group, very early jazz rock group that was of the early psychedelic era. It had some people who later became some really big names in jazz in the 70s. I think it had Larry Coryell in it, and I'm trying to remember if Jim Pepper was in it, but Larry Coryell was in it. He's a very big name for a jazz guy, especially early 70s jazz. But this was a rock group he was in before becoming a jazz guy called the Free Spirits. And they only have one album, but that one's good. And let's see this. Electronic Philharmonic featuring the Freeman String Symphonizer featuring Ken Freeman. So this is another electronic synthesizer record that I like. And here we have Paul Frees and the Poster People. So Paul Frees was one of the most well-known voiceover artists of his day. He was the voice behind the Pillsbury Doughboy. He was the voice behind the Beatles for when the Beatles had a cartoon that aired on ABC. I think he was the voice of some of the members of the Jackson 5 when the Jackson 5 had a cartoon. So he was the voice behind a lot of cartoons, and he did a lot of impressions. So this is a record of impressions where he has old movie stars doing current songs of the day. It has one of the worst Beatles covers I have ever heard. It is Let It Be, done in the style of Warner Oland doing Charlie Chan. So Charlie Chan was basically acted by a non-Chinese guy trying to play a Chinese guy and doing all those Chinese stereotype things. And so it's basically like really bad Asian stereotypes singing Let It Be. But because it's such a train wreck, I had to get it. And some of the other stuff that is less politically incorrect on this record is pretty hilarious. And Fracoba Africans. This I got through digging at flea markets and garage sales. It is a privately pressed record that it's kind of Afrocentric. Voices of Black Angels and the Drums of Thunder. So it is I guess they sometimes call it kid funk. It's a kid funk record where they're like around the time of the Jackson 5, people were putting a lot of records that were kind of funky but had little kids on them. This was a school project record, so it wasn't commercially available. This was a record that was done as part of a school project, and it has like African drumming on it and some spoken word stuff on it, and it's pretty funky for a school project. So I got this simply by going through flea markets, and it's amazing. And let's see, Fresh Air. This is a psychedelic band, and let's see. Can't remember much about them actually, Friar Tuck and his psychedelic guitar. So this is another one of those psychsploitation records, mostly very guitar-driven. Jimi Hendrix was actually supposedly a fan of this record, so you may think it's lame, but Jimi Hendrix didn't think it was lame. It actually has some really good guitar, some scorching guitar on it. Ruth Ann Friedman. So Ruth Ann Friedman, she's kind of a female singer-songwriter who was kind of in the folky psych vein, and she wrote the song "Windy" for the association, and she's just a good kind of folk into psych performer. So Ruth Ann Friedman, Constant Companion, it's a good record. And Friend and Lover, Reach Out of the Darkness. They had, this one isn't as hard to find because they were kind of a one-hit wonder. It's hard to tell what the actual song title is. It was sometimes advertised as Reach Out of the Darkness, but I think they actually sing Reach into the Darkness or Reach, anyway, it's that song that goes, I think it's so groovy now that people are finally getting together, reach out into the darkness and you may find a friend. They were a male-female duo. There were a lot of male-female duos in the 60s that tried to cash in on the success of Sonny and Cher. And this was one of them that came a little later after Sonny and Cher kind of were a bit passé, but they had a one-hit wonder with Reach Out into the Darkness. And it's a very, very upbeat, flowery, powery number. Frigo. So you may not have heard of Johnny Frigo. This is Johnny Gus, the electric jazz of Gus Giordano by the Johnny Frigo Sextet. So Johnny Frigo is he's a kind of a jazz funk instrumental guy who mainly did work on dance records. So that's why they're hard to find. They were used to instruct people in dance classes, but they have some really good funky stuff on them. And this one, let's see, what do they? Oh, it has Day Tripper on it. So it has the Beatles' Day Tripper on it, which is why I had to get it. But it has some really funky music on it. It has Hawaii Five-O. It has the funk instrumental Scorpio from Dennis Coffey on it. Spill the Wine, that really funky song by War, Eric Burden and War. So it's got some really good choice of covers for stuff for like trying to funk it up for some dance lessons. And let's see here. Oh yeah. So this is another Johnny Frigo record that I ended up finding somewhere at a show. Jazz Is Now, the Johnny Frigo Sextet, 10 Modern Jazz Dances. I don't think this one is as expensive. Maybe it doesn't have any drum breaks on it, but still good stuff to have. And Johann Dolgas Frisch, Symphony of the Birds. So this is another bird sound record. Very interesting subgenre to get into. It was Mickey McGowan who got me into all of that bird music. Mickey McGowan was the first guy interviewed for Incredibly Strange Music Volume 1. This is a great Exotica record. Dominic Frontieri, Pagan Festival, great foil cover on the front. And this was a killer find for me. I found this shit for 50 cents at the flea market in Oakland, and it is a great psychsploitation record. It's Max Frost and the Troopers. Max Frost and the Troopers were a fake group that were created for an exploitation movie called Wild in the Streets, which is about how basically the voting age is lowered by this charismatic rock star, and eventually little teenagers start taking over the country and start putting all the old people into concentration camps where they force them to take LSD. No, I'm not kidding. That is exactly what the movie is about. But The Shape of Things to Come, it was actually a top 40 hit, but the band was never really a real band. But even the songs that aren't hits on this record are pretty good. And Joyride, Friend Sound. So this was on RCA, but this is almost a completely experimental avant-garde record. It's mostly just found sound and musique concrète. And it was actually done by people who used to be members of Paul Revere and the Raiders. So it's the most unlikely guys you could think of doing really experimental stuff. But the 60s were a very bizarre time period, and hallucinogenic drug experimentation can cause people to do very strange things. And so stay in school, don't do drugs. And this one from Britain with Beat, I just think the cover's hilarious. It's another one of those Beatles cash-in records, except these are mainly guys. They're not trying very hard, and they mainly, I guess they took some mops and dyed them black and put them on their head instead of getting real Beatle wigs. So, very cheap. And Fife and Jeffrey. This is a lounge record I found in North Dakota. What is interesting about it is one of the songs on it is Cocaine, the Eric Clapton song that was originally by, I think, J.J. Cale. So it was, you don't usually see a lounge record with a song about cocaine on it, but this one does. And, of course, these guys are classic. You gotta have them. The Fugs, the best, the top-selling rock and roll band on ESP Disc. The Fugs, they're sometimes called a little proto-punk. They're definitely very beatnik oriented. They were very much against any sort of taboos in music. They had a very amateurish, shambolic sound to them, but it was still actually quite good if you got into what they were doing. So the Fugs, and this is their earlier album, the Fugs' first album. So this actually came first. So the Fugs' first album came first, then the Fugs, and then here's the third album they did on ESP Disc Records, Virgin Fugs, for adult minds only. And I believe this was stuff they recorded even earlier than the first album, but it came out as the third album because it was just a little too far ahead of its time, and it had to wait like a year or two for the world to catch up to it. Jun Fukumachi. So this is a track-for-track remake of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, done by a Japanese synthesizer guy, and the cover is just a complete mirror image version of the Sgt. Pepper cover with people with their backs turned. So it's a very, very weird cover. And let's see. Okay. What else do we have here? Oh, Elephant Candy by Fun and Games. The Fun and Games. This is another Sunshine Pop record. There's a song on here, The Grooviest Girl in the World. I like that one. I'll try to remember what some other ones, but The Grooviest Girl in the World is a highlight track on this. Funtown, favorite 20 selections. This is a ventriloquism record. It has a cover version of Anne Murray's Snowbird, and it also has a cover version of Beatles' All My Loving, so I had to get it. I mean, a ventriloquist dummy cover of the Beatles. I have to get that. Oh, and Rhinestone Cowboy. It has a cover of Rhinestone Cowboy delivered by a ventriloquist dummy. So, definitely very bizarre. And of course, one of the great, the pioneers, Funkadelic, Maggot Brain. Just an absolutely amazing record. Mother Earth is pregnant, and you all done knocked her up. And then Fuse, kind of a hard rock group of the early 70s. Fuse is interesting because it later evolved into the group Cheap Trick. And, here, I have, so I'm starting in the G's now. Serge Gainsbourg, the Histoire de Melanie Nelson. So, this is one of the soundtracks that Serge Gainsbourg did. He was a very randy fellow. And, let's see. Oh, yes. And, of course, a great sort of psychedelic 1980s record by Galaxy 500. This is Our Music. Their records are... So, they were a band that kind of existed when I was in high school, in the 1980s. If you're into, like, drone and very slow Velvet Underground style psychedelic music, this would be what you're into. They do a cover version of "Listen, the Snow is Falling," which is a Yoko Ono song. So it wasn't. It was kind of a hip thing to do, to cover a Yoko Ono song back then. And, but it's a very, very atmospheric kind of drunky, slow sound, and very drony. And it's psychedelic in that way. Cassie Gardner, Pipes of Blue. I found this in a record store in Idaho somewhere. It's pretty good, jazzy instrumental stuff. Mid-60s. And Gail Garnett sings about flying and rainbows and love and other groovy things. Gail Garnett was an early folk singer. She had a hit with a song called "We'll Sing in the Sunshine," but she has some other albums, and the other albums she did that were hits are actually pretty good. So this is one of her folk albums that she had after her hit. And then eventually she went full on psychedelic. So that's why I'm interested in her. I kind of like older performers who decided to go psychedelic later. So these are two, Gail Garnett and the Gentle Rain. So the Gentle Rain, REIGN, that was a band she created. And so there's Sausalito Heliport and An Audience with King of Wands. And these are both Gail Garnett's psychedelic records with an actual band backing her up. It's kind of a San Francisco psychedelic sound. She could, she wanted to cash in on that. Since a lot of the psychedelic singers of San Francisco were already imitating a lot of folk singers, I think she had a right to do that. Fantastica, Music from Outer Space by Russ Garcia. So this is one of the top space age bachelor pad music era records from the late 50s. And so we have Yes. I am told this is a very sought-after electronic record. It is from the 1970s era when people were into the idea of playing music to their plants. It is Mother Earth's Plantasia by Mort Garson. Mort Garson was a very interesting guy. He was, involved in lounge music, listening music from the 1950s, and then he did some very interesting experimentation with electronic music. So this is Mother Earth's Plantasia, and it didn't cost me much. Like, it may cost me about $20 to $30 when I first found it. When I ordered it from a guy over the internet, maybe 15, 20 years ago. But it's since become a really cult record, and it is really skyrocketed in value since then. And this is another Mort Garson record where he decided to go experimental into the electronic stuff. So Ataraxia, the unexplained electronic musical impressions of the occult. So this was very much in keeping with the late 60s, early 70s fascination with the occult. And I'd like to collect some records that are associated with that. And here, Gathering at the Depot, featuring The Litter. So this is a various artists album from the hippie era of Minnesota. The best known group is a group called The Litter, which actually did end up getting a major label deal sometime in the 60s. But it's mostly just local Minnesota bands. But this one isn't as rare as you might think. I think there's a lot of copies floating around in Minnesota. So if you know somebody in Minnesota, they might be able to find one for you. And the last one in the box, Uri Geller. So Uri Geller was a psychic from the 1970s. He used to appear on a lot of talk shows, and he supposedly demonstrated his psychic abilities through bending spoons with his mind. I think he's pretty much been debunked. I mean, nobody can really bend spoons with their mind, but this was kind of some of the crazy stuff in the early 1970s that people were into, and they were into this guy enough that they gave him a record deal. And so he doesn't really sing, so they're mainly recitations that he does over music that are kind of supposed to be mystical or metaphysical. And there's one that's kind of unintentionally hilarious. It's called Velvet Space, and he's like, "Oh God, you're so big," about how God is supposed to be so big, but it sounds like something else. So, Uri Geller, self-titled record, a wacky celebrity record from the early 1970s, and that's the last one in the box. So, thank you for watching this. Thank you for watching this video with many interruptions for technical difficulties, and thank you for bearing with me.